A smell. That's how it started. Not a witness, not a tip, not a confession. A smell coming from a flower box on a balcony in one of the most crowded cities on Earth. Millions of people lived within a 1-kilometer radius of this building. Thousands passed beneath that balcony every single day. Office workers, street vendors, mothers with children, tourists with cameras pointed at the skyline. And not one person knew that 2 men were buried inside it, in concrete, already set, already hardening, already doing what concrete does, sealing everything inside it away from the world, permanently, quietly, without a sound. Here's what makes this case different from every other cold case you've heard. The killers didn't run. They didn't flee to another country in the middle of the night with a bag of cash and a fake passport. They didn't panic. They didn't leave a trail of fingerprints and shattered glass across a crime scene for investigators to follow. They built something. They brought materials to a residential building in the middle of a city that never fully sleeps, in broad proximity to thousands of neighbors. And they constructed a tomb. They had a plan. They executed it with the kind of cold, methodical calm that should be psychologically impossible for a human being to maintain after committing a double murder. Think about what that requires. The physical labor alone, moving 2 bodies, sourcing concrete materials, mixing, pouring, smoothing, all of it done silently. All of it done without a single person noticing anything unusual enough to report. And then they walked out of that building like nothing had happened. Back into the crowd, back into the city, back into their lives. The Chia brothers, wealthy Singapore goldsmiths, experienced businessmen, men who had navigated the gold trade across Southeast Asia their entire careers, simply ceased to exist. But here is what I need you to hold on to as we go through this case together. Whoever did this knew them. How do you bury 2 men in a city that never sleeps and get away with it for 40 years? Stay with me. The Chia family ran a goldsmith business in Singapore. In the 1980s, that meant something entirely different what it means today. Gold wasn't just jewelry sitting behind a glass counter. It was currency. It was trust made tangible. It was generational wealth that families like the Chias had built over decades, through discipline, through relationships, through an intricate web of business contacts that stretched across the region. The brothers were good at what they did. They were respected. They moved in circles, where a handshake still meant something, where your family name carried weight, where your word in a business meeting was treated as a contract. They traveled constantly, Singapore to Kuala Lumpur, Kuala Lumpur to Bangkok, Bangkok to Hong Kong. The gold trade operated through networks that existed somewhere between legitimate commerce and whispered arrangement. Deals made in hotel lobbies, in the back rooms of jewelry houses, in quiet dinners where no contracts were signed because none were needed. Nobody in their network thought twice when they boarded a flight to Hong Kong in 1984. It was a normal trip. They had made it before. They would make it again. Except they wouldn't. A week passed. Then another. Back in Singapore, the family waited. At first with mild concern. Maybe the trip had extended. Maybe a deal had run longer than expected. But the phone calls went unanswered. Business contacts in Hong Kong had nothing useful. No one had seen them at any of the usual meeting points. So the family called the hotel. and the hotel confirmed what nobody wanted to hear. The brothers had checked in. There was no record of them checking out. Sit with that for a moment, not because it's a dramatic detail, but because of what it means practically. A hotel in one of the most commercially active cities in the world, where every room, every night, every transaction is logged, and 2 guests simply stop existing in the records after check-in. The hotel clerk's words must have landed like something physical. "They checked in, sir, but we have no record of checkout." They weren't delayed. They weren't unreachable. They were gone. When Hong Kong police began reconstructing the timeline, the detail that disturbed investigators most wasn't the crime scene itself. It was what had happened before it. The brothers had met someone. The meeting appeared entirely business-related, the kind of arrangement that required no explanation, no background check, no hesitation. They hadn't been lured with something suspicious. They hadn't been approached by a stranger. They had walked into that meeting without a single moment of alarm, which tells you everything about the relationship they believed they had with whoever called them there. Red flag number 1. The meeting had no paper trail, no email, no written correspondence, no contract reference number. Red flag number 2. When investigators worked through the brothers' entire business network, every contact, every associate, every person who had ever arranged a meeting with them in Hong Kong, not one person admitted to setting up this particular appointment. Red flag number 3, and this is the detail that should have cracked the case wide open from day 1. Nobody reported seeing the brothers after that first evening in Hong Kong. Not at a restaurant, not at a business address, not on the street, not in a lobby, not through a window, not one person. In a city of 5 million people, someone was lying. Multiple people almost certainly were lying. The silence around those final hours was not coincidental. It was constructed, just like the tomb waiting for them in Elizabeth House. The discovery happened because of the heat. Hong Kong summers are punishing. The humidity settles on the city like a physical weight. Thick, relentless, inescapable. It accelerates everything. Every biological process that begins after death moves faster under that kind of heat, becomes impossible to contain, impossible to ignore. A resident of Elizabeth House noticed the smell first. An unusual, persistent odor coming from a balcony above. Then another resident noticed it. Then a third. Complaints reached building management. Building management investigated. And when they looked inside that flower box, that completely unremarkable, sun-bleached, ordinary concrete planter sitting on a Hong Kong balcony, they found them. Both brothers, encased in concrete, hidden in plain sight in one of the most densely populated urban environments on the planet. The forensic team that processed that scene would later describe it as one of the most calculated crime scenes they had ever encountered. This was not a body disposed of in panic. This was not an impulsive act followed by desperate concealment. This was architecture. This was someone who had measured the dimensions of that flower box, who had calculated how much concrete they needed, who had sourced those materials, transported them into the building, and executed the entire process without a single neighbor, security guard, or passerby registering anything unusual enough to call the police. The level of operational control required to achieve that is staggering. Investigators built a profile quickly, organized, methodical, familiar with the building, either a resident, someone with a contact inside, or someone confident enough in their access that they moved through the space without hesitation, almost certainly known to the victims personally, not just professionally. And then the investigation hit its wall. Financial records from the brothers' business dealings revealed something that nobody wanted to say out loud, but that everyone in the investigation understood. There had been a dispute. The public record never fully confirmed the specifics, but investigators believed it centered on a transaction, a significant sum of money, or gold, or the value equivalent of gold that had changed hands and had not been returned in the direction it was supposed to go, which raises two possibilities that lead to very different killers. Was this a robbery that escalated? Two men who resisted or who fought back and were killed because the situation spiraled beyond what the perpetrators had planned? Or was it something colder than that? An execution, a deliberate decision made in advance to permanently silence two men who knew too much about where certain money had gone, or who were owed something by someone powerful enough to decide that paying the debt was less efficient than eliminating the creditors. Both theories were investigated. Neither led to an arrest. The interrogation room that should have been the center of this case stayed empty. No one sat across that table. No one was shown the photographs and asked to explain themselves. No one was charged. No one faced trial. The people who mixed that concrete, who poured it, who pressed it smooth, and walked out of Elizabeth House into the Hong Kong afternoon. They moved through the legal systems of two countries without being touched. The case sits in Hong Kong's cold case archive today. Both Hong Kong and Singapore authorities have reviewed it at various points across the decades. There have been no new public arrests, no suspects named, no forensic breakthroughs announced. The building still stands in Causeway Bay. The balconies are unchanged. The Chia family received no justice. What they received, instead, was the particular devastation of knowing their sons were murdered, knowing the killers were almost certainly identifiable, knowing that those people had lived freely for 40 years, had aged, had perhaps built new lives, had perhaps sat at family dinners and watched the news coverage of other crimes without flinching, to perhaps be elderly now, having taken every answer with them into the ground. But here is what has changed since 1984. Cold cases that were considered permanently closed are being reopened. DNA phenotyping can now reconstruct a physical profile of a suspect from a single hair. Genealogical DNA databases have solved murders from the 1970s by tracing a killer through distant relatives who uploaded their ancestry results to a public database without ever knowing what they were helping unlock. Digital forensic tools are recovering data from devices and records that investigators in 1984 couldn't have imagined existed. The science that failed the Chia family back then exists now, and that means the window is not closed. So here's the question I'm leaving you with tonight. Somewhere in the world right now, possibly in Hong Kong, possibly in Singapore, possibly somewhere neither investigation ever thought to look, there's a person who knows exactly what was poured into that flower box. They know the weight of the bags they carried into that building. They know the sound the mixture made. They know how long it took to set. And every summer, when the heat returns to cities like Hong Kong and Singapore, and the air gets thick and close and inescapable, I wonder if they think about it. Do you think they do?